talking in the context of now people will say that these are wild. What's it got to do with Tolkien? Well, the funny thing is, the Sumerian religion was the original source of astrology. Astrology being a number of doctrines, the geocentric cosmology, the geocentric solar system, like the moon, sun and planets rotate about the earth, which was reached its most sophisticated form in Ptolemy's epicycle, system of epicycles, but that is one of the central doctrines of of Gnosticism. Well, the Sumerian religion, I suppose, it is assumed in these talks that the Sumerian cosmology, the geocentric cosmology, the identification of the 7 planets with gods or demigods is a part of almost all paganism. And this Sumerian religion was taken up with just some minor name changes into the Babylonian religion and what's called the cult of Baal. This religion and furthermore, this Babylonian religion spread at least to Greece and Rome, and there's a Greek pantheon, Zeus and all that. There's a Greek pantheon, and there's a Roman pantheon, Jupiter and Mars, which are identified with the planets. There's 7 gods and 7 planets. Now this idea, with the rise of Christianity in the 1st century, it was noted by at least Saint Irenaeus in his writings in the 2nd century that there was attempted by early Gnostics, like from Simon Magus at least, and after Marcion and Basilides and Valentinus and all those early Gnostic, what we call heretics, they attempted a syncretization of paganism with Christianity, and this introduced just renaming the seven crystal spheres as eons, and not having gods or demigods, but just renaming them as eons. Now, it seems that there has been in the past syncretic systems of Judaism and paganism. I mean, there's quite a lot of. There seems to have been quite a lot of syncretic cults in the centuries BC amongst the Jews, where Baal Moloch and Chemosh and the gods of the Old Testament gods, the pagan gods of the neighbours to the Israelites, the Ammonites and the Moabites and the as well as the further north the Sidonians and the Phoenicians, as well as the Arameans having their own cult in Damascus. So there's there was a lot of syncretization of Judaism or the Hebrew religion with local paganism recorded in the Old Testament, which is one of the most, which gave rise to so much trouble. You can read, which, like, at least in, which gave so much trouble for centuries. But anyway, the fact is that Gnostic ideas and Gnostic writings were heavily influential on, well, they can be found liberally sprinkled in the Talmud, and sort of a lot of rabbinical writings, and there's a great number of Gnostic ideas that have found their way into rabbinical writings, which it has been noted had a lot of influence on the Quran itself, I mean, clearly Gnostic writings have had a great deal of influence on Catholic theology. A most striking example of that being the cult of Saint Anne. Now, Saint Anne was a very popular saint in the Middle Ages, before the Reformation, but a lot of all the myths of Saint Anne were sourced from Gnostic sources. But that's not, by all means, that is not the end of Gnostic influence on Catholicism. But what I would like to point out is that how does this relate to J.R. Tolkien? Tolkien. If anyone of the viewers has had a chance to read the Silmarillion, now the Silmarillion is a creation myth of the Tolkien's fantastical fictional Middle Earth, but what is striking about the Silmarillion is there's it's very, very, very similar to the original creation myth as or the original pantheon as outlined by the Sumerian writings. Now, there's many striking similarities between the Silmarillion and well, for example, there's an original original creator god, which in the Gnostic systems is called the Proarchy. But I'm trying to remember the Sumerian word for the original god is I think, I'm trying to remember, it was Enlil, but in Tolkien's world he's called Eru. But this Proarchy engenders, he engenders seven demigods, and this is what you see in the in Tolkien. Tolkien talks about there's seven. He calls them the Eldar. The seven Eldar in the Silmarillion are, and there's seven accompanying females. But these are the original. These Eldar are the original Adams and Eves, so to speak. And this is the polygenetic theory of paganism, where it's like there's more than one Adam and Eve. There's a multiplicity of them, and they give rise to a number of different races on the earth. Now this see in the Gnostic systems there's the original God and the seven eons. Now depending on what Gnostic system, whether it was 7 or 8, and you will note that there's 7, but along comes Melkor, who I think is the 8th from memory. I could be wrong, but there's 7 or 8 levels, but I think Melkor comes along, and Melkor doesn't have a mate, which is interesting, because if Melkor corresponds to Lucifer or the stellar sphere, as opposed to the 7 crystal spheres that whereby the planets, you see. In the Gnostic systems, some of them, the eons, the 7 eons, were actually hermaphroditic. So they were hermaphroditic because they had a male and a female aspect, because one of the reasons was that planetary conjunctions were seen as a form of celestial intercourse, where Mars was having a date with Jupiter, say, but so they had to have a hermaphroditic form so they could have sexual union. So this is the there's so many ideas in the Silmarillion that are lifted holus bolus out of the Sumerian myths. It's surprising, but it's not surprising the Kabbalah is the most, since whenever the Kabbalah was written, Kabbalah is the ultimate product of Gnostic writings over the centuries, and the Kabbalah ends up with 10 levels, but it's actually 7 plus number 3. And so this is a good example of Tolkien was, he was supposedly a Catholic, conservative Catholic, whatever that is. But the Pantheon.